So after you set that up and you have linked your materialized CSS library, the material icons library, your own style.css, and a materialized JavaScript file, we should be ready to start adding some stuff to our page. And so if we look at right here of what the app is actually supposed to look like, notice that the page is really split into two sections. What are those two sections here? Over here on the left, we have the messages, which is essentially saying, who are we talking to? And that messages section is broken up into a couple different sections. One right here for that little messages top part. Another one right here to start a new conversation, like the actions. And then everything right here is, everything right over here is like your contact list. Notice that? So there's really three sections there, all in that one larger section. But that is the smaller part of this main section right here. And this main section right here is like what you use your app for. Actually sending messages to people. You type into this text message spot, it'll send some info. Now we're going to get pretty close to this. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to look almost perfect. We're not going to do all of this, like we're not going to do the emoji stuff yet because that takes a little bit more time. If you want to learn how to do emojis, they're super fun, and they're actually not as hard as you might think. And you can get pretty much any emoji in there by writing a for loop to get all the emojis in. And I'll show you how to do that later. That'll be an extra additional feature if you want to add that, okay? But the rest of this, we're going to build it like almost exact like what you see here. You cool with that? So the first thing we're going to start with is building off this, sectioning this into two different sides, building this main page, and then building the top part of this side. Is that cool? Now we're going to write a little bit of CSS, but fortunately, Materialize is going to do a lot of the work for us. And that's going to just make our lives so much easier. So let's go about doing that right now. The first thing you want to do is head into the Materialize library and grab a navbar. I'm actually just going to go with this navbar right here, the very first one they give us. And I'm going to copy paste that directly into the body of my file just to make sure that everything is working. So I go to Components, click on Navbar, grab that whole little nav section, the first one that pops up, and just copy it right into the body. And if I do that and I hit Save, and I refresh my browser, you'll see I have something like this. Everybody have that? Give me a thumbs up if you have that. The CSS actually does not matter. I will go to the CSS right now. Just delete everything. You don't need it. But good question. I would slack out the CSS, and I will slack out the CSS as soon as I write some. But currently, you don't actually need any CSS. It doesn't really matter. Now, notice how we have this navbar that extends across the whole screen. We actually only want it to extend across the right part of the screen. You see that? And this color right here is like purple, and either has the name of the person there or their phone number. You see that? Kind of interesting. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take this section and we're going to cut it into like a third or so, and we're going to have like a sidebar over here and the main section over here. So inside the index.html, I think that's actually a good time to do that right now. We're going to create a div with a class equals sidebar, because this is what's going to contain the sidebar with all of the messages. And then over here, we're going to have a div with a class equals main for the main part of our app. And that's actually where I want my navbar to go inside of. So copy and paste the whole navbar you just did, like this, and put it inside this div with the class of main. So we're basically splitting the page into two sections here. A div with a class of sidebar for the left side of the app, and a div with a class of main for the right side of the app. And so if we just copy paste the navbar right into here, nothing should actually change on our app itself, because we haven't really told the sidebar and the main how much space to take up. But if we do this, and I save, it should look about the same, huh? Did anyone get anything to change? Looks the same for me.
Or this is the main, right?
Yes, I put this navbar right into the div with a class of main. So everyone sees that so far? Now, I'm actually going to use a new version of CSS to make this work. We're going to write some styles for the body. We're going to make it display grid. Now, if you have never learned CSS grid, it's totally fine. CSS grid is a great, great, great addition to CSS. It makes so much of our layout easier to do, and it takes a lot less work to make things look nice and to have them positioned exactly where we want them to be. So that's pretty useful for us, and in this case, all we're going to do is we're going to tell this grid, first of all, that the body should have a minimum height of 100 view height. So it's always the exact same height as whatever the size of the screen is. This will be useful for us in a little bit, and I'll show you why. The next thing we want to do is we want to split the page into two different sections. We want it to have two columns. One that is, I think, like 1 fraction, and the other one to be like 4 fractions. We might change that up in a little bit. But all we're going to do right here is we're going to say grid template columns 1 fraction. Let's go with 4 fractions for now. I might change that later, but just something like that. Now, if you do this, you'll notice, by the way, that Cloud9 does not like grid. It does not like 1 fraction. It does not know what that is. It will still work, but Cloud9 does not recognize it. And so when you save this, and you do this, it'll still work. You'll see here now we have a section that's 1 fraction and a section that's 4 fractions. That's essentially like 1/5, 4/5 of the page, and you can change that to be whatever size you want. Though Cloud9 will still say you have an error. Don't worry, you don't. It's just Cloud9 being Cloud9.
What's that supposed to look like?
Now it should look something like this. And if you got this, you're on board. Everyone give me a thumbs up if you're there. If you're not there, it's cool. We'll come around and help you fix it right now. Now by doing that, we pretty much have what we want for the most part, but this nav bar still doesn't look very nice, and the sidebar, we can't really tell where it is. And so I'm going to do 2 things here. I'm going to make a style for the class of sidebar, and I'll make a style for the class of main. And each of these are going to have some information to them, but all I want to do is I want to be able to see the difference between them right now. So I'm going to give this main a background of hashtag EEE. And we're actually going to change that later on too, but for right now, that's all it's going to be. It's not going to be exactly perfect yet. We're going to constantly improve this every time we write a little bit of code. But for now, I just want to be able to see the difference between the sidebar and the main. And so inside the sidebar, we're going to write a little bit of code that says height, 100 view height. And we actually wanted to display flex, which is another relatively new version of CSS, which allows us to lay out things vertically and horizontally very nicely. And so if I do this, I can also then, let's say, justify the content. Actually, I don't even need to do that right now. Let's do flex direction, column, because I want to put things in a column. And let's give this a background of hashtag FFF. So this one I did background EEE, which is a little bit gray, and the sidebar did FFF. Now, if you don't know what those 2 hex codes mean, this is essentially, this is white. White, and this is like a little gray. That's all you should really know about these colors. Now, if you do this, you should see a stark difference in the 2. Do we now see 2 different columns? I'm also noticing, by the way, that probably doesn't align. I think this column is a little bit bigger than 1 fraction versus 4 fraction. It's probably like 1 and 3.5 or like 1 and 3. So you might want to change that up a little bit. So you might want to say like in the grid template columns, let's go with 1 and 3 fractions and see how that looks. Save refresh. Yeah, you know what? I'm okay with that for now. Does that look about right? one fraction, 3 fractions. That looks pretty nice. And so I think at this point, we have a setup that we can now start actually coding out the rest of the sidebar and make it look nice. Sound good? Perfect.